founders in the region were a bit resilient to the obstacles that we face on the macro levels.
A lot of the founders have found a way to export their product and sell into enterprises in Europe.
Very few companies really adopted the AI at a big scale.
Commercial roles. There's still many manual aspects to it, right? So I think the first wave is we have to automate this.
How you kind of do the fact checks and ensure the answer that you retrieve.
The core of any ecosystem we've seen throughout history is making sure that tool.
Welcome everyone. We're more than happy to have a new series of Tech Talks in Dubai. We're pleased to have with us today Kartik Renjen, head of startups at AWS.
Kartik. Thanks for having me. Really, really excited to be here today.
Pleasure is ours, Kartik. So Kartik, tell us about your journey. Like you have been into lots of interesting, different experiences, in different cities as well, whether in Nigeria and UAE and then so can you tell us like a brief about your experience?
Yeah, happy to. So it actually started here. So I was born in Dubai. I grew up in the region, lived in Dubai, Bahrain, Kuwait, so throughout the GCC with lots of travel. And went to Canada for university, so spent a few years there doing undergrad, and out of school I started working for Kraft Foods. Actually, I started in a finance role, so very different function, and it was a great experience. Big company, so learned how a big machine works. I think the challenge for me is it's difficult to try new things in a big machine. So I learned a lot, but then went and jumped into another role, which was a corporate development role, and was doing international strategy there. So I was helping one of the Canadian players expand. And, we're focusing on two markets. So we built a model to score emerging markets and which one to enter. And we focused on Brazil and India. Brazil was a huge success. India was a big failure.
Because of the competition over there, or?
Yeah, I think, when, especially at that time, when choosing mode of entry, it can be acquisition, it can be greenfield, it can be joint venture. And I think they're, doing the due diligence on the right partner, from a fit for market, but also fit for the partner itself and the company values is really important.
Yeah.
So that lesson really stuck. But I think, in that role, the challenge for me was sitting behind Excels and financial models, and I really would rather be on the ground building something, So I did 2 years there, and that's when the tech journey really started. So I read a magazine, I think it was Economist magazine actually, about Rocket Internet, which was a German venture builder, essentially building proven models from the West in emerging markets. And so I went through my alumni network to find who I knew there, and eventually connected with someone, and they had two kind of options.
That's basically after SU or before SU?
That was before. So This is my first kind of tech role.
Okay.
And they had an option in Lazada, which was a later stage venture in Singapore, and then an option to go build Jumia in Nigeria. And I'd never really planned on living in Africa or living in Nigeria, but it was very exciting to go build, the first e-commerce venture there. So I left Toronto and moved to Lagos, and I was there for a year and a bit. And there I moved from, first role was finance, second was strategy. This one was commercial. So I was building the category team there, which I'd never done. Working on pricing, merchandising, and trying to fly this startup. So great experience. But I knew I always wanted to come back to the region. So after a year and a bit doing that, that's when I joined Souk and had the chance to meet the founders and the CFO at the time, Asif. And currently some of the people are still there. So Ronaldo was the founder of Souk, who's now a VP at Amazon. So I met that whole group and decided to join them, first in Dubai, again in a finance role, And then I moved to Saudi to run our commercial function there. And in 2017, we exited that business to Amazon. And that's when the Amazon journey started. And then I moved into product, first on working on the integration, but did a few different product roles. And eventually up until late 2022 was leading the consumer-facing product team. So search, delivery experience, and all that. And at that time, I really wanted to get back into startups and the VC world. I didn't have the courage to start my own business, and this role came up at AWS to lead the startups team for the exact markets that I'm excited about, which are Middle East, Africa, and Turkey, and gives me a chance to work with founders day in and day out, like yourself, and a lot of the investors. So that's how I ended up here.
Very interesting. And what's also like extremely exciting, like how the transitions between like the different roles that you have in the different ventures. So starting from finance and then heading into the commercial and then heading into the product. So how did you find the transition into the product role?
Yeah,
was it harsh or?
It's interesting. It's not as difficult as I thought it would be.
Okay.
It was difficult in terms of putting in the hours and that initial learning curve, a lot of self-learning, but there's a lot of similarities. You know, a lot of the product role is around figuring out what the right adoption metrics are going to be around planning. You know, finance has a lot of planning, a lot of metrics, obviously. I think where it's a little bit different is you work with a lot more stakeholders. And also you need to think a little bit more around experimentation, but a lot of the skills are transferable. And now I'm now back in commercial and B2B sales, which is another pivot. But I think it's interesting, you know. One, I think, you know, for certain people it's really great to be a generalist and try working in different functions as you figure out where you have the best flow, right? So this concept of flow I think is important as folks are figuring out the right place for them. And that comes when you're doing work that, you know, you I don't want to say don't consider work because that's kind of lame, but let's say you don't consider the time of work, right?
Yeah.
And I think figuring out that flow state is really where you know you're in the right place, and I definitely think I've found that on the sales and commercial side and partnership side. So.
Interesting. So now you're focusing at the startups ecosystem that exists around the MENA region, right? So how do you find it so far? Like, what are the similarities that exist between the different regions? Are there anything kind of special about a specific region against another one?
I think it's one of the most exciting regions to be building in right now. Because it's one of the earliest, right? And I think what's interesting about ecosystems around the world is a good chunk of trends tend to follow. So when I look at the Middle East and Africa ecosystem today, by the way, we often talk about it as one ecosystem, but there's lots of things going on in 20 plus countries. I think it bears a lot of similarity to India. And also Latin America.
You mean the whole MENA region or specific parts of it?
So I think the parts of it.
Okay.
And so I think there's certain trends that really stick out, right? So we know that a good chunk of funding goes towards fintech.
Yeah.
Which was similar parallel in Latin America. And what happened post 2019 is they started to see a lot of liquidity come in through some of these exits and IPOs, and that really spun the flywheel faster there. And I think we're starting to see some of that, especially in Saudi. And there's some more in the pipeline. So my hope is that those will spin things faster, and we see the same trajectory that Latin America saw towards the end of 2019. And so I think that's at a macro level. I think on a micro level, the founders in this region especially are used to overcoming barrier after barrier, right? So when I think about e-commerce as an example, same thing for fintech, because there wasn't, an organized courier network, a lot of these players had to go start their own. Because there wasn't a payments infrastructure, had to go start a payments infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I think founders are used to that, and that gives a unique advantage that exists in this ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think also as being kind of founders in the region, we're a bit resilient to the obstacles that we face on the macro level. So you can think of what happened in Egypt when it comes to the devaluation. So even though of the unfortunate event of the 40 and 50% devaluation of the currencies, many people and many companies started to figure out their ways. So I think that's also an advantage, like how resilient people are and determined to ensure their success regardless of the macro economical situations.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I think there are a lot of founders there that have taken on that macro situation, turned it into an opportunity, and not kind of playing that victim mentality back to their
yeah,
investors.
absolutely.
There's so many examples, and I think about, one that just comes to mind is I think about Breadfast, like just integrating the whole supply chain backwards and flipping that, that problem into an opportunity. It's fascinating. And even Egypt is one example. I think about Turkey, which is a market that we do a lot of work in. There, what we see is that a lot of the founders have found a way to export their product and sell into enterprises in Europe and other regions, so they're able to maintain their revenue base in a constant currency. So
Yeah.
A different approach, but nevertheless they're finding a way to make it work.
Yeah. And so now we have talked about the strength that exists within the region, but what about the challenges that you think it exists across the different countries here?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges. I think one, we already touched on currency, right, which is relevant to it's relevant across. So it's relevant for Egypt, it's relevant for Turkey, it's relevant for Nigeria.
Except for Saudi and UAE, of course.
Exactly. And I think, so that's one. I think many have found a way to turn it into an opportunity, but again, there's some business models where you just can't, right? And we've seen those companies really take a hit over the last 3-4 years. I think the second is that we have great developer pools and talent pools in Egypt and Jordan. And we have a lot of startups sprouting up in the GCC that don't have as large developer pools. And I see, we're finding ways to bridge them and, set up remote offices and move people in certain cases. But I think that's still a challenge, because the core of any ecosystem we've seen throughout history is making sure that pool spins and has that.
Absolutely, and access to talents. And this is, I think, what we currently face in the ecosystem with the rise of the AI technology and so forth. Still, like very few companies really adopted the AI at a big scale, and the primary reason to it is still they don't know how to do it through the access of the key AI and data talents that are out there.
Yeah.
So I think it's still a challenge to crack, but maybe just a matter of time till
absolutely.
Figuring.
And there's one more actually that is maybe a little bit controversial, because there are lots of debates on this. But personally, I feel that it's undercapitalized. So yes, startup funding has come a long way, but it's nowhere near where it should be. I think over the years, investors in the region have opened up to taking on more riskier asset classes such as venture capital. But again, a lot of these pools are designed to invest outside.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, there's huge capital outflows to scale ups in the States and Europe, but our local funding pool for startups still is much smaller than it should be, according to me. And I think that'll change when some of these exits materialize, and investors see that there are huge returns to be made for startups based in.
Yeah, absolutely. The more success stories that can be brought in the market, the more appetite it will encourage more VCs globally to penetrate the market and so. Okay, so following that, what trends do you see in the region that will be coming up soon, whether on the industry side or whether in general?
Yeah. So I think it's building off some of the challenges, but I think one thing that'll continue is that Egypt and Jordan will continue to be key pools of talent on the tech side, and we'll see more bridges, right? So in the past, we used to see just remote tech offices being set up, but now we're seeing actually this bridge between Egypt and Saudi, where Egyptian startups are starting to do go-to-market in Saudi and really have HQ2 in Saudi or vice versa.
Yeah.
So I think that'll continue. I think,
but not with the same momentum, by the way. Like, if you ask me, since 2 years ago, there was a huge influx of people that are coming from Egypt going to Saudi, but now the momentum it's coming very, very slow.
I think the other one that is interesting is that the cost to start something is continuing to drop. Right? So, we've had discussions on cloud in the past and how cloud was a catalyst to bring down the cost to do your MVP or get something up and spinning. And I think, obviously AWS played a big part in that, in addition to all the VCs coming together. So now we have this new catalyst around no code and self code tools that started a few years ago, but now adoption has just skyrocketed over the last 24 months. Replit, Cursor. By the way, Replit was actually originally from Jordan.
Okay.
So I think these tools will just reduce the cost to get to an MVP further and further, which kind of levels the playing field for an ecosystem that, as I said earlier, I believe needs and deserves more funding in the space. And I think that trend will allow startups to go global faster and at a lower cost. And I think that's very exciting for the region. I don't know if you've thought about that at all, or you see.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting times to see like how the evolution of the software development comes into play, especially with the AI, because the tasks and the project that was taking like 2 or 3 months, now it's taking not more than a week to be built. So that's a kind of a huge success from the company perspective, but at the same time, like it would be creating a very competitive landscape across the companies at the same time, because now with the project that you've spent years to build, there is someone that can just launch a company tomorrow and build what you've done in a matter of day or a couple of weeks even. So I think that there is an interesting kind of balance that one would need to think about in order to really ensure that even though of course anyone shall use and leverage big time the AI, yet at the same time like see how he can add some kind of a competitive advantage over, because it wouldn't be just around adopting the AI and that's it. There needs to be something else in order to make the competitive landscape much better. Perfect. So we'll come to the next section, which is around the cloud adoption. So first, how is the cloud adoption that you're seeing here in the region? Are you seeing like most of the startups are going after the cloud at the first glimpse, or are there any resistance?
Yeah, I think so. I'll talk about overall and from a startup's perspective, right? So overall, I think there's been heavy acceleration over the last few years. I think when it comes to startups specifically, most are born on the cloud. I think the exceptions that we see are those startups that are bound by specific regulations, that need to do on-premise first, which is a small percentage. But barring that, I think cloud is the preferred mode because it's just faster to spin things up. I think also more and more, if you look at the dev pools, they prefer to build there. They've upskilled themselves there. Obviously, cost is a factor, and agility, right, in terms of adding services and delivering, shipping product faster.
Let me tease you here. So, do you think it's going to be a trend, and then there would be a downfall for the trend, for example, because people would think about the cost element that going into the cloud, it's very costly. Then they would start realizing just a matter of, let's say, getting some bare metals and doing their own solutions?
So I'll start by saying I don't think bare metals will be the answer, but I do think we're going to see more and more thinking around how to manage costs effectively and how to optimize, right? So I think initially it's at early stages when we think about pre-seed, seed, it's a bit of an afterthought because you want to ship faster and
Absolutely.
teams are smaller.
And then you have AWS credit as well.
And you have credits if you're eligible for that. And then after, when it becomes a meaningful part of your P&L is usually when it starts. So it's a bit reactive. But I think two things. One is it'll start earlier.
Yeah.
And now there's more tools, whether it's from cloud provider themselves or specific startups that are building, FinOps tools to be able to track your optimization, your spend, etc. I think that's a trend that will continue. So I do think it'll continue, but there'll be more kind of scrutiny and thinking around the cost angle.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other interesting thing is basically building the ecosystem around it, right? So there is that marketplace through which there are different companies that are reselling their solutions in their marketplace. So this is a kind of how you build, I wouldn't say a closed ecosystem, but a plug and play solutions that in case you want a FinOps or a reconciliation solution or any sort of CRM or so, just a matter of subscription and that would be it. No need to worry about how you're going to deploy, how you're going to manage the instances. Everything would be sorted out through that marketplace.
And I think that's something that adoption is going to continue for the marketplace because we want to give choice across the tool suite. There may be several tools, whether AWS or otherwise from other ISVs that are providing these solutions, and that choice should be open. That kind of pre-vetting gives some trust to the the CISO and CTO that this has been vetted for the marketplace. So I think adoption of the marketplace will continue in this region and kind of move the same direction that we see in more developed regions.
Great. So, Kartik, can you tell us more about how you help the pre-seed companies and the early stage companies during their early journey for the POCs and so forth? Are there any kind of programs that?
Of course. So we have. So I think the flagship program, which you touched on earlier, the first pillar is around how we help from an economics perspective, right? And we've been running AWS Activate, which partners with the region's VCs, incubators, and accelerators to help early stage startups who are eligible for those credits get up, start building, and start shipping products. So I think the first is the economic piece. Linked to that, because you mentioned POCs, is we have a large network of partners that we deploy across stage, even to early stage startups to help on POC. And there's separate funding programs for that outside of credits. So I think that second one is a little bit economic, but also taking advantage of our partner network that can help on design, on consulting, etc. I think the third is, we work closely with some of the funds in the region and there may be specific startups that need help on go-to-market. So you mentioned marketplace. That's where we take a kind of customized approach to go deeper on who they're trying to sell to, whether it makes sense within the AWS network, marketplace, or another pilot. So that's the third.
And then that's in collaboration with the VC itself or with the
It
incubator?
often is. Yeah,
Okay.
it often is. And it's usually more specific towards B2B SaaS startups that that
Okay.
are looking to sell to enterprise, or
Okay.
because that's where we can help, and AWS has a history of that.
Now AI B2B.
Yeah, exactly.
SaaS is becoming obsolete word.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so what's the craziest story that you've went through when it comes to scaling a startup, or you've witnessed one of your
Yeah,
companies?
I think definitely the most interesting experiences were had in Nigeria, because it was early stage, it was moving very fast. Um, Business was, almost doubling in size every month. So uh, it's funny, like the day, after 5 or 6 days of starting, my boss at the time, who's now a good friend and founded that venture, the Jumia venture, he came up to me. He's like, I feel like things are slowing down since you got here. And mind you, these were like 5 20-hour days, right? So the first day of onboarding was like a full 20-hour day, and then it continued that way because there was just so much work that um, the days never ended. And yes, it was painful at the time, and uh, it was a ton of work, but it was just a phenomenal learning experience. And we were tracking all the metrics hourly, visits, conversions. At the same time, we were making sure orders were shipped on time, inventory was coming in. So it was really a multi-hat experience, and was by far the
Wha-
craziest one.
yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so let's move to the AI and the deep tech. So, what's your perception about the Gen AI, how it will change the adoption and the kickoff of the different products in the market by the startups? And the second part is how it will impact yourself and the way that you think about as well managing your relation as well with your clients.
Yeah, I think there's a scale, right, of where folks think this is going, and there's some folks on the scale who think that it's not here to stay, it's a fad. There's a lot of hype, whether on the valuation side or whether on the technology itself. And then there's the other end of the scale that says everyone needs to find new jobs, because essentially everything will be automated, or all white collar jobs will be automated in 2 years. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I think it's here to stay. I also am very optimistic, because if you think about it, we've always found things to do, right?
Mm.
So if you think about pre-farming, there was hunting that freed up time. Then if you think about the Industrial Revolution, when we moved from farming to having factories, that changed how we work. But we found new things to do,
Yeah.
whether it's art or, all these new kind of professions came up. And then we went into the technological revolution, and there were some pivots there in terms of new jobs coming up. And I think the same thing will happen here. We've always found, in every revolution, we found new things to do, and I don't think it'll be any different. I do think that the full scale adoption and full scale automation is probably going to take a little bit longer than we think. And the reason I think that is, there's a lot of use cases where there's no room for, or very little room for error.
Mm.
And a lot of the tools are getting us 80-85% there, but that marginal gap of moving from 80-85% to the high 90s is going to take time. And that's why I think, adoption will start, and is already starting with, a lot of tasks, but that full scale automation that we think of is still far away. In terms of how we work and how that's going to change things, especially from a sales perspective, I think when I think about um, a lot of these roles, commercial roles, there's still many manual aspects to it, right? So I think the first wave is we have to automate this, which will make folks more productive, right? So I think that's going to change in terms of how you log things, how you document things, how you prepare for meetings, and that's already kind of happening. So I think that's the first wave. I think the second wave is a lot of these first level conversations can likely be automated, right? And as they're automated, the quality of the future ones just increases. So I think that some of these changes are already happening. You see a lot of startups that are automating the first sales kind of commercial layer discussions already in
Yeah,
flight.
whether
So
the pre-sales or the exploration meetings and
exactly.
yeah. But do you think the most vulnerable, I would say, positions are the very senior or the very junior
Yeah,
position?
it's a great question, because if you look at what's happening with many pockets of the world for the entry level positions kind of starting in the workforce, the the job market is tough right now, and those unemployment rates specifically in that segment are quite high. And I think there are two parts to it. One part of it is that folks are getting a bit or very optimistic as to how much they can automate. I do think some of that will backtrack as accuracy may not be as high as we think it is. I think the second piece is that all of our education systems so far probably have not adapted as fast as this change, and nor could they, because this is really things are changing really, really rapidly. So I think what needs to happen, honestly, is that our education systems need to prepare
Yeah,
these folks for the workforce, which I don't think the 4-year degree is doing right now.
yeah, absolutely. Because previously, like it has been mostly about the knowledge base of one being, and currently, the knowledge, face it fact, is it is being commoditized. Like you can literally ask any LLM most of the questions, and they would answer. So I wouldn't say it's any longer about the knowledge base, but rather about the critical thinking, how you kind of do the fact checks and ensure that the answer that you retrieve it's well according to your expectation, or it is accurate to a great extent. And the second part is, believe it or not, would be the human element. Like to what extent like you can do the interactions and convey the message properly to the other humans, because as you just mentioned, people and companies are trying as much as possible to automate the workflows when it comes to sending messages, doing the exploration meetings, and so forth. But that will lead to kind of cherish more and more the human interactions. So I think this is a big part that one way or another, I'm not sure how, but it needs to be fed in the educational part, so that it can still like teach the new generations
100%.
the skill set that has a gap in the market.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think, something that I've been thinking about is, and you touched on it earlier, is how do you build a moat in the new world where you can get to that same level of code or automation or whatever your base of business is, right? And I think it comes down to three things. It's communication is one, and that's for you, your teams, etc. I think the second piece is linked to it, the storytelling and creativity and how that builds a brand. And I think the third will be, if you have a very capital intensive business, that's not easy for someone to replicate just based on that. I think these are the three things that'll really create moats or differentiators for businesses going forward.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So on the bad side of the AI, when it comes to the with people using it in a good way to kind of deploy faster and have a better and faster go to market, do you think companies may negatively kind of leverage on this in bad ways? And how do you think about the usage of the responsible AI?
Yeah. Look, I think with any new technology, there's always bad actors um, who'll take advantage of that. And historically, we've seen that as we go digital, there are some loopholes that need to be covered and thought of. Even in your space, if you think about fintech, there's all different forms of abuse, which over the years, I'm sure your product team has developed
It's a cat and mouse
abuse
game.
control.
Yeah.
And then even then, new use cases come up. So I think there will be bad actors, but I also think that it will give rise to a whole new space itself, which is around trust and safety and abuse prevention from AI tools. And there's already companies working on it. So I think that's one, and I think we can't just rely on those companies alone. We also have to rely on our legislators to move fast and come up with the right guardrails and regulation around the use of these tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if we think about it, when it comes to the traditional computing, it's a matter of a single input or multiple inputs, and there are multiple outputs. But when it comes to the Gen AI and the LLM, there are kind of infinite combination of inputs, and then you can pretty much control what's going to be the output. So the problem becomes kind of much more challenging as a problem statement. Interesting. So moving to the next section about the what if scenarios. So Kartik, if you had to start your career from the beginning, what would you do differently?
I think I've been thinking about that a lot, and the initial reaction I have is it would have been better if I had gone directly into this route of where I am now, working in tech, but on the partnerships and sales and commercial side. But then I flip back and think, it was great to have experience across these functions to kind of figure out what one likes, what they don't like, but also there's a lot to learn in terms of skills that are transferable. So I think in an ideal world, it would have been nice to figure this out a bit sooner. But at the same time, I don't regret it because there's so many learnings across the way. Especially if I have the courage to start a company one day. Because it's nice to have experience in different functions because you get a holistic view, and also in certain cases, functions have friction, but then you have a new kind of empathy being on both sides.
Yeah, interesting. So what if the each and every regulator in each and every country like cut off the internet so that the internet is only served within the country itself, and the companies they have to cope with this situation. So how do you think like people would cope with this, or how would you envision such a scenario?
Yeah, I can't. It's interesting that you asked that because I can't even imagine it. And to be honest, it's something that we should think about because there may be a scenario where that happens, and I think that our dependency just continues to increase. So you kind of blew my mind a bit because I never really thought that it could be a plausible scenario, but the more I think about it,
Yeah, actually,
that out there.
yeah, there was an unfortunate scenario that happened like a couple of months ago. I think it was around 2 months. I'm not sure if you know it.
Yeah.
The central of Ramses. It was a focal point of the internet, or most of the internet connectivity in Egypt was passing through.
It was out for 18 hours, or
actually, it was more.
more. Wow.
Yeah. So some people luckily like managed to go into their DR in environments. From our side, we were lucky to kind of do that flipping right away. So we had a very minimal kind of impact. But on the downside, like most of the country basically, and most of the providers were down like in average 48 hours. So it was interesting, and it gave a light bulb to us to think about. Any, it can be happening anywhere on the state level. So Kartik, imagine this scenario. Now, typically, like there are tens of startups that you're interviewing, and you're seeing how you can collaborate and help them growing their business. But what if instead of those tens of startups, you have an influx of thousands of startups? I know it's a good problem to have, but how would that change the process from your side?
Yeah, I think we'll just get the team to work 20-hour days. And no, I honestly, I think this is something we've been preparing for a while, right? So we're expecting that kind of growth to come in, and we see it with the traction in terms of funding rounds, especially in some ecosystems that are growing faster. But also we see a lot of increase on the stealth side, on the bootstrap side. So it's something that we're preparing for and expecting for. So it won't be a total surprise, to be honest.
Okay. And I guess that the usage and the adoption of the AI as well comes into play.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that more and more, and there's different layers of the stack. There's obviously those that are producing LLMs, which we don't see as many in the region, although there are some.
Yeah.
But we see many that are fine tuning, and many that are, that middle layer that are connecting to a specific LLM API or multiple in certain cases to customize the use case for the region. And I think we're just going to see more of that because, linked a little bit to what we were talking earlier, I think the UX journey in this region and the customization of how we communicate in this region is going to present a big opportunity in this middle layer, and what happens, post that API call.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So moving into the future outlook section, I know that we've shaded some lights when it comes to the opportunities that exist in the market. But if we were to say in the next 3 to 5 years, what can be different that would be upcoming by then?
I think one thing that'll be different on the kind of vertical side is that we'll see less share of fintech startups. So
okay,
I
that's
think
good news for us.
Yeah, I think it's good news. It's good news for the ecosystem as well, because a lot of the infrastructure kind of barriers that were there in the beginning are now starting to be solved. We have strong payment networks, strong, POS system, strong digital banks that are coming up, strong solutions on the SME side, whether it's lending, etc. So those are important barriers to solve, and they're usually the first. If you think about it, in ecosystem, the two first kind of verticals that spring up are fintech and e-commerce.
Yeah.
So I think now what we're going to see, especially starting next year, is a shift more into solutions for B2B, more into AI startups in that middle layer that we talked about before.
Yeah.
And the whole kind of mix of funding will change. I think that's one. I think two is that we'll get more and more support from regulators and government, and I think a lot of the learnings over the last few years will have point to the direction that regulations is going to move faster and favorable for startups. I think the third is that, over the last 10 years, if you think about the ecosystem, most startups have built for the region, operated in the region. We will see more global startups linked back to the point around the barrier of cost to build something that you can then export globally, right? With some of these new tools and low code tools and low code tools. And these are the three kind of themes that I think about. And I think the last one is we'll see continued growth in that strong developer pool.
So let me tease you here as well on that. A follow-up question. If you were to invest in only one industry for the upcoming years, what it would be?
I honestly would invest in the middle layer.
Okay.
I would
In,
really,
in the AI kind of
yeah.
landscape.
But specifically, those startups that are really customizing for the region, that are building UX journeys for the region, because I personally think there's a huge opportunity there. So you asked me, I just gave you my instinct answer.
Yeah,
I think there's lots of interesting things going on across verticals, but I think this is one where customers, whether B2C or B2C, will adopt quickly. Teams will be able to ship fast, and I think there's a real moat in communicating that value proposition locally, customized with the right UX, the right language, etc.
absolutely. And I think the other spectrum would be around how would you localize the AI itself, or how you deeply integrate it within the market. Because if you think about it, whether Claude, Anthropic, whether ChatGPT, whether any sort of LLM, it does have an out-of-the-box integration through MCP servers with Google Outlook and so forth. But these are the kind of the flagship products that everyone uses. But what about, for example, integration with Talabat, integration with the local players that are serving the market? So if that layer that you mentioned was able to kind of do that localization and the deep integration, so as if you're unifying, as if it's a one box that is able to integrate with almost all of the companies over here to offer a kind of a seamless experience.
Yeah,
So,
I think 100%. I think there's lots of opportunities still to customize, um, and I think as the models become more multimodal, we all think about chat, and most of the consumption happens on the chat front. But I think very soon, as voice gets better and better,
absolutely,
we're all going to have to give some exercise to our vocal cords, because I think it's going to shift quickly from text being the dominant form of communication
absolutely,
with the models to voice very quickly.
absolutely, absolutely. It's much faster when it comes to the communication than texting. Yeah. So, how do you personally stay ahead with all of these kind of exciting trends and all of these tech advancements that are happening? Any kind of recommendations
Yeah,
that?
I think it's interesting, because when you think about these technologies and when they're launched, it's usually the youngest folks that have the best adoption, get familiar with them fast. So I
Absolutely.
think, you know, in my case, I make it a point to proactively try all these tools, test use cases, use them as much as possible, because I want to make sure that, you know, we understand what's happening with them. But two, also, I think a lot of this automation can make life better. So I'm trying to use it for genuine use cases in my life as much as possible. And I think, one of the great benefits with these tools is it has made learning a lot easier, because it's
Yeah.
customized. You can ask follow-up questions. I can ask my dumb questions when no one's looking, and make sure that I fully grasp the concept without worrying, how fast or how slow the class is moving, because
Yeah.
it's customized.
Interesting. So, what would be a recommendation or a suggestion for VC that you would give? In the
Yeah,
region here.
I think we have a lot of great talent in the regional VCs. I think they've seen a few cycles now, and I think a lot of them are out there, um, making sure that we're selling the Middle East and Africa story well to investors, because we do have great founders and great opportunities here. I think the one thing that I would encourage is for the VCs um, to stay abreast of these technologies and get more technical, right? So some of them have actually hired in-house CTOs or product folks with product background, Where historically, if you look at our regional VCs, a lot of the talent comes through private equity, investment banking. So
Yeah.
lots of experience on modeling, on valuations. But I think more and more, especially at the junction that we're at now, is we need some technical talent on board on the investor side.
To be able to take the decision and give advice whether the whole situation makes sense or not. And
100%.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, and last piece of advice for young founders and tech entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd say is that, so I firmly believe there's no better time to start a company. A lot of the barriers have been reduced. We talked about them throughout, so I don't need to repeat them. But I think really spending time on building, on shipping, on testing, and whether that's you do that through an incubation program or you do it on your own, is something I would really encourage founders to do. There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of groups out there. There's a lot of meetups out there. And sometimes what I see is, there's efforts around networking when the full thinking and delivery of shipping a great product hasn't happened yet. And I think community is very important. But I think especially if you think about the early phases, it's really important to get the product up and running, to ship, to test, in most cases, unless it's a moonshot kind of idea, get customer feedback quickly, which I think we need to do more of. And now we don't have the same barriers, so don't need to wait for a technical team or even in some cases technical co-founder to get started.
Absolutely. Kartik, it's a real pleasure to be with you.
Likewise. It was a great discussion. I really enjoyed being on here.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kartik. And looking forward for our next gathering.
Likewise.